Need to record it. I'll send you the link.
Request to record this. Okay, so just to do
Yeah.
it would be better if both of us recorded this.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Start.
So, good evening, gentlemen and ladies. I have the pleasure today to sit with Khalid Shamis. Good evening, Khalid.
Good evening.
Um, I came to know Khalid's film last month, and I'm lucky to delve into the private world uh, of a filmmaker that I came to admire. I do believe that, like, I'm of the opinion that the best biographies are autobiographies. We can offer none of those, but I will let you give the viewer just a few words about your background before we delve into the details. Just your film career and your some of your some aspects of your private life because
Hmm.
it is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we live many lives in one, right? As we get older, we realize we've lived many lives. So where do you want me to begin? I can talk about my film into the film world or young life,
Let's
but everything is
start.
connected, you know?
Okay. So for people who at least know you through your films, they know that you're a Libyan filmmaker. So
Mhm.
let's start there. What does it mean? Were you born in Libya? The both of your parents are Libyans? I know all of that,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
it's better
Yeah,
for
so
you to.
yeah, actually I was not I was born in London, in the UK in the 70s, 1975. My father came from Libya. He was born in Rarian in south of Tripoli. My mother's from Cape Town, South Africa. And she is from a line of what they call Cape Malay, which is like, I guess, is the racial classification for the Muslims of the Cape who might have originally come from Indonesia as slaves, indentured laborers, prisoners, etc. And so my father from Libya, my mum from South Africa, they met in London, and I was born there with my siblings, and I only actually went to Libya in 2012 for the first time. So later in life, much later in life. So I never see myself only until I started making this film about my father. I could say I'm a Libyan filmmaker. But
Okay.
before then, and even since then, I mean, my filmmaking career has happened really on the continent in South Africa because I left London after many years and I went to live in Cape Town to make my first film. And that's where my career started as a filmmaker. So I guess I'm an African filmmaker. I see myself more of an African filmmaker than a Libyan or even South African.
Yeah, even in the if someone Google you, uh, they would get the Libyan, British, and Capetonian. They don't say South
Yeah,
African.
right. Yes,
Specifically
exactly.
from
Because South Africa is so vast,
yeah.
and I only, for majority of my young life, I only knew the South Africa I knew was Cape Town. I didn't know Johannesburg. I didn't know Durban. I didn't know the rest of the country. And it's a massive country, and it's lots of languages and lots of ethnicities and lots of cultures. But even within Cape Town, there's many cultures and many worlds, right? So the world I knew was a kind of corner, a small corner of South Africa, of Cape Town itself, this kind of Cape Malay Muslim community, right? So that's why I would call myself Cape Townian and I would call myself a Londoner, not really Englishman, you know, because I
Mhm.
grew up in London is different from the rest of England as well.
Yeah.
So all those things, come together in
Son of cities, not countries.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
So you've been to Libya twice, in
No, once
2012.
only. Only in 2012, only the once.
Oh, I thought you went, like, you came back for the documentary because it was
Yeah, no, I
so
didn't.
the European footage.
Yeah, I shot in 2012, and then, I mean, any viewer who knows the history of modern Libya knows that 20 between end of 2011 and 2014 was okay, right?
That's the golden age. I call it the golden
Exactly,
age.
the golden age. And so I was there 2012, and then I wasn't there again. So I've never been back, and I was there for only 10 days. So it's hard for me to say I'm Libyan in a way because I don't really know the country. But at the same time, I know it in a very different sense. So I can claim, to be Libyan as well.
Yeah, so it's not mere sophistry if we say that you're not a Libyan filmmaker because you did not grow up in the absence of art houses even and
Yeah,
cinemas and cinema does not exist. So I think that affects how you make film. Let's talk about influences. Like what's
mm.
promoted you from a viewer to a maker. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I grew up as a youngster in the 80s in London, right, in England.
Mm.
So this was a time of, pop culture. Um, pop. We loved watching movies. American movies, obviously, mostly, and English movies. That was it. We didn't grow up with kind of anything outside of that. Didn't even grow up really with documentary, apart from, David Attenborough, right? Or news panorama, those kind of investigative documentaries. Those were the kind of docs that I grew up with. So I didn't really learn about documentary. But I loved to watch anything that would take me into another world, I think. And so those pop culture influences, stayed with me. And I went to study film. I went on to study film for A level and for my degree, but it wasn't a practical course. It wasn't a filmmaking course. It was a theory. So there, in that space, I understood story, but it was still very much kind of, you know, Western classical narrative. It was genre. It was, auteurs and the masters of filmmaking rather than making films myself,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
So for a period since when I graduated in the late 90s, in 97, until I left for Cape Town, this whole period, I was working in Soho, in central London, for television companies, right?
Mm.
That were producing stuff and were making stuff, gathering, editing, producing like quick, like long, short form stuff, content that would go, elsewhere. So
Mm.
then I studied um, production politics, I guess, politics of production in that space. Um, and then only later, when I wanted to make this film about my grandfather, then I
Imam.
only, yeah, Imam and I had an idea of, or a confidence in editing and filming. So I bought a camera. I had a laptop to edit. This was early 2000, 2005 is when I left, but I started researching just before. And I left and I went kind of one man band just to make the film, with an intention and an idea and a connection to a place and family. And then I just let the film process of making that film take me, right? And then I guess I started to become a filmmaker. Before that, I wouldn't say I was a filmmaker, but I understood story construction, right? Which is, it's a whole life. That was a world. That was a life. And then another life started when I turned 30, 2005, and I went to Cape Town to make that film. And I kind of stayed there and got involved in the industry in South Africa. And that opened up a whole world, right? Opened up a world. But it was a gradual process of, being naive about filmmaking, about the industry, about trying to make this film and searching and thinking about my grandfather, who he was, and finding out about him. So I was gathering and gathering until I edited that film. And I made the film in 2011. I released it, which was when I started making my second film about my dad. So the first film was about my mother's father, and then my. So I was kind of exploring these men in my life, I guess, through my mum.
Yes, and I think starting with documentaries is quite it's easy and at the same time difficult because you see yourself stepping into uncharted territories, but at the same time you don't have a plan. You don't go there to,
Mm.
oh, I have a statement and I have a material, and I'm going to sort of organize the documentary to say what I want to say, as
Mm.
opposed to actually getting the camera, flying to Cape Town, and just investigating the whole thing. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
you never thought of, uh, stepping into narrative films.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I did. I did. I actually, I wrote a script. I started doing an MFA in Johannesburg in 2006. I wrote a script, like a. Yeah, I love fiction films, narrative films. I always watch stuff, and um, I'm keen on it. I mean, it's. I did write a script. I did have an idea for this kind of romantic comedy that was just kind of part of the MFA. And I am writing a project to do with Imam Harun and his life, right? And his death,
Uh,
the last 4 months of his life, actually, a narrative fiction piece. But I always thought it was too, I was always worried about the expense of it, you know? Documentary,
mm,
you can just have one camera, an idea, and you can go. And you're not, it doesn't relatively cost a lot of money. It's not about the money, it's about the idea. With fiction and with narrative, it's really about the money, right? Can you raise the funds to make the thing? And I always felt it was a bit excessive. Or maybe it was also beyond my means.
mm.
I've edited fiction stuff, but I've never really made any, that period before I went to the UK, to South Africa, where I was working in Soho, I made, I was trained as a director, and I made trailers, I made commercials, right? And kind of these promotional videos for television companies I was working for. So there was an element of fiction in that. There's an element of the kind of the scripted, but I always felt it was, I like watching fiction, not so keen on making it. I just thought it was kind of excessive, you know?
In the end, right at the ending of Imam and I, there
Mm.
was a bit of scenes from a play where you play
Oh,
your
yes.
is that the same project? Is it
No, that
based on
was,
the
no, so that was, so Imam Harun, right, in the kind of Islamic consciousness of South Africa, is a very big figure. He holds a very high. When you talk about the Islamic contribution to apartheid or the lack of contribution, it's Imam Harun. When people say the Imam, when they refer to the Imam, it's Imam Harun. So he has this very high kind of position within the Islamic consciousness of South Africa. So um, since his death, since the 80s, there were certain groups, certain Islamic groups, Qibla, and others would kind of commemorate his life and death around the end of September when he died. So this one occasion, and it's been done before, theatre plays about Imam's life in South Africa. There was a famous one in the 90s at the Baxter Theatre. Um, and then this one, I happened to be in Johannesburg at that time, living right I think it was 2007, 2008. And OCAF, this organization, OCAF,
Mm.
like a Sadaqah organization. They put on these events. So they put on a play with other plays about Islamic, the Islamic history in South Africa. So you have stories of Tuan Guru and these other characters in the kind of Islamic cosmology, and Imam Harun is one of them. But I was there at that time. They were doing the play. They asked me for some input, and I wanted to help them write some scenes for the plays. Scenes from the film actually I was making from stories that I had heard from the filming of the interviews that hadn't been seen before in this kind of in the play. So I thought, let's mix it up, put some things. While we were rehearsing for this play and rehearsing with different characters, we were waiting for someone to play the role of the Imam in the play, but no one came. So I just played myself. I played him. So it was really kind of strange because here I
You
am.
had to change, like me, right?
I shaved. Yeah, exactly. I shaved my head. I had to. I was there, kind of following these footsteps of my grandfather, trying to make this film, and then in the course of that, I'm literally in his footsteps and playing his character in the play. So it was filmed and then we put it into the film, kind of made sense. I mean, it's all kind of fortuitous. And so that's how that came about. That was my only kind of acting career.
I've read that he was not entirely, but relatively an obscure figure in South Africa, and also knew that he was honored in 2014, like with a medal or
Yes,
the recognition came out late. So I think there was some othering within the Muslim community in South Africa. So just give a few words
yes,
to Libyan viewers because we have our own figures like Omar Mukhtar is a saint
yes,
and
yes.
King David is a saint. So things aren't that simple, at least with the story of your grandfather.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of, because during the 60s, the Muslim community within apartheid, within the racial classifications, had a privileged position, right? So
Mm,
there weren't many Muslims, especially from the imamate, who would say anything against the government, right? And
mm,
apartheid was one of the worst kind of things we had to deal with in the last century. So the Muslim community were very, very kind of timid and apolitical, which is like the opposite of what Islam is all about. It's about struggle, it's about revolution, it's about calling out the oppressor, standing up to the oppressor. So I think for that, because Imam rocked the boat, then some people weren't with him or weren't supportive of the work he was doing, right? Because he was saying, this is wrong, what we're facing. And he paid the ultimate price. So obviously, those people who were against, who were his detractors, would have said, see, we were right, and he was
mm.
wrong to have gone the way he went because he died. They killed him. Um, and so he's obscure in, if you look at the history of South Africa, right? If you think about history of South Africa, it's Mandela, it's Biko, it's Bishop Desmond Tutu. It's ANC story. It's the ANC versus apartheid South Africa. But that's not the truth. It's the ANC, of course, part of it. But like all these kind of liberated countries, there are many groups who are against the oppressor. There was the PAC. There were many different groups. So Imam, he wasn't aligned. He was aligned more with the PAC than the ANC, right?
Mm.
So I think you're right. I mean, his recognition from the government came late because he wasn't ANC, right? If he was an ANC member from before, he would have, from '94, he would have been recognized already. And so this is one of the reasons I think he has some obscurity. But the obscurity, Allah hides those, you know, those people who have the strength and power, right? The awliya are hidden amongst us. So maybe obscurity for him was a good thing in a way.
Yes, and we will let the viewer watch the film to get the details, the
Yes,
many
yeah,
details. I think it's an important film because otherwise I wouldn't have. I mean, there are no books, of course, anywhere in North Africa about uh, the many layers of apartheid. Um, just before we move to the other film that I've seen, when did you realize that my father was a dissident in the late 80s.
yeah,
My mom's dad was an anti-apartheid figure who was killed in prison. I mean, right now it's almost a fact that he was killed in prison, right?
yes, yeah, totally, yeah, yeah.
Now, on both sides of the aisle, this political struggle and exile. And when did you realize that? Most importantly, when did it become important for you as a filmmaker? Before before being a son.
Right. Yeah, yeah. As a filmmaker, I'm not sure. I mean, I knew about my dad in around the mid 80s, right? When I was around 10, 11, then I started to become aware because things happened, you know. There was the shooting in London, the embassy, and my dad was there, and we had to go undercover, right? We had to hide with the police. So around the age of 10, things started popping off in London with well, earlier than that with Gaddafi and killing people in Europe. Then I knew, okay, something about my dad. Not everything, just something. I knew he was against Gaddafi and he was, you know, in opposition. My
You
grandfather,
knew who Gaddafi was
sorry?
as a child. As a child, you knew who Gaddafi was.
Yeah, yeah, I knew who he was. I knew who he was. He was, he was, imagine I knew my dad couldn't go back home to Libya. And the reason he couldn't go home was because the man in power there, Gaddafi, didn't, was against whatever my dad thought of him. So I knew that. And only,
Was
as I grew up, it came a bit clearer, right? But I didn't really know the extent of the danger until later.
was that the only thing you knew about Libya as a child? Gaddafi?
No, no, no. I knew like my mom. I knew my grandmother. I knew like she had tattoos on her underneath her lip on her chin. I
Yes.
knew that I knew bezine and couscous. I knew this kind of food that came from there. I knew those kind of things. I knew some Libyan Arabic words, right? Games instead of inzil, right? And so those things I knew. I didn't really have a Libyan identity, but mainly it was that. Mainly it was Gaddafi's there in power, and my dad can't go back, and he has family there, and it's kind of he's in opposition. So I knew Libya from outside. With my grandfather on my mum's side, we had always visited Cape Town, right? And my grandmother would come. So we had access to South Africa in the late 70s and the 80s. We went to visit. Um, and the first thing I knew, which I talk about in the film, is this book, The Killing of the Imam, which is a book that was written about him with this quite striking cover, which was in our house. And there were pictures of my grandfather. And so he was kind of around. He was a figure that was kind of in the periphery in our house and in our world. And especially when we went to Cape Town, we were introduced as, oh, Imam's grandson, this, that, because my older brother actually, the firstborn, his name is Abdullah Harun Shamis. So he was named after him. So we had, the cousins from London and Imam's grandson. So we knew about him. So that's my kind of young age. I knew there was this kind of political something in the air, you know. As a filmmaker, only when I started to make the film about my grandfather, you know, I never thought I'd make a film about Libya, my dad, but I always thought it's an interesting story to tell, the kind of spy thing and the double life and opposition. But I thought, the only way to really make that film is to go to Libya, and there's never going to be an opportunity to do that until, the revolution. And then, I thought, okay, perhaps now something there. So slowly you start to,
There's something almost immoral about comparing two tragedies, like the vicious apartheid regime in South Africa and the violence that has been going on for 40 years in Libya.
hmm,
And you had the opportunity to go visit South Africa in the 80s, in the
right,
70s, but you could not do that in Libya. So it's quite ironic.
yeah,
Just before moving to your beautiful film, I think every Libyan should see this documentary, The Stray Dogs, the Colonel Stray Dogs. Every Lib, I we Libyans, almost every Libyan know what stray dog means in
right.
Abdullah, which is uh, the sort of high-profile dissidents back in the 70s and the 80s. But you just said that you know a bit of Arabic words, and I can't remember exactly what the poem was. I'm assuming it was a poem, but you said something love that tint of Arabic
Oh,
at the tip of the tongue, this gibberish.
yeah.
What was it? What was
This
that?
is this is my older brother, Abdullah. This is him.
Yeah.
I love the smell of Arabish. Um, then he says that he mentions some names of our cousins. Ishdeda, Sundus. So he mentions,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so that's his. So I have three siblings, right? An older brother, younger brother, and a sister. But they're only in the film kind of at the end,
Yeah.
in the gathering. And so this kind of film, when you make a film about your family, your father, yourself, I couldn't not include them. What do I do with my siblings, right? How do I bring them into the film? So as a documentarian, you think, okay, so I'll interview them, right? Sit down,
Yeah.
interview, get their thoughts. And then I thought, I need the film to be uh, contained within the space of my dad's study, his office, and archival, and all these archives of history, right? So it's in the house and history. And so I couldn't, to have to cut to an interview of my siblings. Firstly, it would look odd that we have this visual, and it would take too long. It just make the
Mm.
film too long. So I thought, I'm going to speak on behalf of my siblings, right? But I'm going to include them somehow. So Abdullah, I asked him to write me some poems because he's a poet. Three poems. One, I just said to him, write me a poem and recite it about our early life growing up and kind of having some idea of Baba and, the Libyan thing, struggle. Another poem about the 90s, in the 90s, when we became teenagers and we were kind of, as my dad comes home, he leaves the front and he comes home in a way, we as teenagers leave. We kind of, there's a separation. And another poem about, finally arriving in Libya and your feelings. So I didn't, I just gave him some ideas like, this is what I want you to write about. So those are his words. The first one is very much about young life in London. So that last one you're referring to talks about, his feeling or his kind of sense of being in Libya for the first time. And so, yeah, I included my younger brother. There's a story of jihad when he was born, and Zainab films does some filming later in the film. So they all have a place in the film, but not in that kind of traditional way of, interview, sit down, interview, tell us your thoughts. So
I loved
that's how
how
I
you
included them in.
I loved how you left it shrouded in mystery. Like, oh, listen to these poems.
Right.
Who said that? But do you know Christopher Hitchens?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, his memoir. Of course, I haven't read it. I mean, there's no chance to find any book of Christopher Hitchens in North Africa. His memoir, Hitch 2022. There is a conversation on YouTube. The moderator noticed that he mentions no women in his book. Uh, and Christopher Hitchens, I mean, except for a few pages about his mother, a few pages about Virginia Woolf, which is deceased author, and Christopher Hitchens goes like, "Well, there's my mom. That's not nothing." So, which leads me to my pseudo Freudian question: Is it? Do you think that sitting with your mom was the best way to infiltrate your father's psyche, his dark history as well? Right? Because you said you wouldn't sit with your brothers, but oh, my mom,
Right.
she knows about political struggle.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, I think this is something I think I want to talk about my mum, but I do want to say
Okay,
that
but
I think
was it the first time? Was it the first time that you sit down with her to talk about your father's history? Was that in the document, or was it the first time in the documentary?
no, I mean, over the years we've spoken about it, we have
Okay.
always had conversations over the years, and we knew things. I kind of built the film in a way that unfolds. It's like, we're finding out for the first time. But of course, a lot of those things, we knew.
Mm.
But I guess it was the first time we sat down and spoke about it, like formally in a way. Um, I want to talk about my mum because it's quite specific, also with both films. But the Freudian thing, I
Amila
think,
Harun.
Shamila, yeah, I
Amila
think
Harun.
that the film itself was my way of sitting, having a conversation with my dad, right? Just as a son, because, Libyan men, right? And their sons. When was the last time, I don't know, you spoke to your dad and you had this honest
No, my dad
conversation?
is quite unique.
Right. But for many people and many Arab men, it's not a
Yeah,
common thing.
no, yeah,
So one
yeah.
of the reasons I think I made the film subconsciously was to have a conversation with my dad, or to spend that time, or to share a moment, right, in life together. My mum occupies a very interesting place in this film because the kitchen, right, is her space, which is where we see her and we meet her. And it's also the kind of the heart of the house. It's where the food is, it's where the conversations are. And her moment in the film is the middle of the film, right? So for me, it kind of, and it wasn't planned like that. It just kind of, occurred. Oh, now we're in the middle of the film. We're with my mum. Um, and there are lots of references. The flowers in the film, the roses, they kind of, in a way, allude to my mum. And so uh, she is also the keeper of secrets, right? She's the
Mm.
holder of secrets. She had a father who was holding all these secrets also, and she wasn't there when he died, and she kind of held this kind of space of him for many years. So in the previous film, my mum is my entrance into the film about my grandfather, right? And my mother is my entrance into the film about my dad. So
Mm.
she's kind of holds both films together in this very subtle way, but very, for me, very powerful way. So it's in a way they both tribute to her. And so also only when my dad's sleeping that I can have a conversation with her about what he was up to, you know? And
Okay.
this is kind of, yeah. So it's just playing with lots of things, playing with things, and there's truth in there as well.
Mm. Okay. That's. I think it was. It. I thought it was fascinating that I might be wrong, but I think sitting down with your mom came almost directly after you found, um, I think it was a box really, that your father had a box of his political history, and there was booklets and pamphlets on how to use
Yeah,
arms,
yeah,
and sort of pressing him on, how did you use an art? Did you I even mentioned this in my article, that you had to ask whether your father was quote unquote a terrorist.
yeah,
And it was beautiful that, oh well, I mean, your dad of course wasn't a fighter. I mean, he was a spokesperson. But at the same time, like he gave you a sort of a diplomatic, even though true, question, and then you had to sit down with your mother. Well, was he a terrorist? I mean, I thought this is like I'm
yeah.
still
Because with your
following.
mum, you can speak more directly to my mum,
Yeah,
right? I can say, "Look, tell me." With my dad, it's like, you have to have adab around, be have a bit more
yes.
etiquette. Yeah,
I mean, speaking of apartheid, once upon a time was a terrorist. I mean, then,
yes,
then he was the modern father of.
yes.
Uh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we should move now to talk about filmmaking in Libya, because of course thankfully, you haven't been a filmmaker in Libya. But
Yeah.
right now, for a filmmaker, you see the recrudescence of police states in one in one in one region. You see chaos in another, um, political prisoners, exile, the same thing. Uh, we revisit the same scene as filmmakers. I know I promise not to ask what you would what's your advice for young filmmakers in Libya. But I am a filmmaker. I told you about that. I just
Mm,
made
mm,
one short documentary about Libyan cinema, and the thrust of that filming that documentary was, why am I not able to film my narrative films? That
mm,
was the documentary. It's a documentary about why can't we make films. So I call myself a former filmmaker because that's what it is. But there are young people who are trying so hard right now um, to even do the bare minimum,
yeah.
shooting a documentary. We don't have to, secure funding for studios or whatever. Do you have secret tips like Werner Herzog when he says, "I will teach you how to," he
Pick a
said,
lock.
don't go to film school. Just learn how to
Yeah,
break the law."
yeah. I mean, I think you have to just be. You have to allow your curiosity, and your naivety to lead you. You know, in a way. I mean, I know more about making docs than fiction, but I guess the principles would be the same in a way, where you are, because we make docs like fiction, especially when we edit. And mostly my work is as an editor. In the editing, doesn't matter if it's fiction or doc, doesn't matter. We're still telling a story and we have a goal. We have to get to the end, right? So uh, the idea of curiosity about a subject, whether it's a family member or a space or a character, um, that keeps you going, to allow yourself to be led by that, I think. Because especially with doc, it's very much about just gathering material, gathering footage. Anything you shoot, you can shoot a bird in a tree. You can make it in your film, it doesn't have to have anything to do with the story. It's about gathering material, and archival material or whatever and research and poems, kind of ideas somehow. How do you translate ideas visually? Gathering and gathering until you're at a point where you feel like you're able to start to tell the story, which is basically the editing process. So all of that gathering, you don't need to be a good you don't need to be a good cinematographer or a good sound person, or you just need to be curious and kind of interested in the subject. But I think it's good to have a basic understanding of editing, right? Which is
And
also very basic. Editing, is cut and paste, right? It's how you place stuff and, you know, how you collect sounds together, whether it's music or something else. So if you have a basic rudimentary understanding of editing and you can edit for free nowadays with certain programs and it's quite a simple thing, then all of those ideas that you gather, that's an interesting space. It's almost like standing in front of the painting and painting an image where you start constructing or drawing a building as an architect. This is the space now you're constructing. So kind of a basic understanding of editing helps any young filmmaker. But then up to that point, it's really you and the world, right? It's you and your intuition and your inspiration and your grandmother who's dying, and you want to get those last stories from her of her childhood, right? Just gather it, whether it's on your phone or a camera. Once you have all the material, then who knows where you can take it. So yeah, I guess that would be my advice. Curiosity, intuition, follow that, allow it to lead you, but have a basic understanding of editing. Because once you start putting stuff together that you've gathered, you find on the internet or you shoot yourself, you realize that two images together, they make a third meaning, right? And you put music underneath it, it gives another meaning. And and it opens something in you, right? I think in terms of story. And if you let yourself follow that, then you start to tell a story. Then it becomes all the other problems of narrative and all of that. But you get to that later. The first thing is to just start cutting. Start putting stuff together, and who knows where it will take you.
that's almost impossible without watching at least 5,000 films and reading Sergei Eisenstein. Like you have to get over Sergei Eisenstein, but you have to understand what Sergei Eisenstein is telling you to do. Um,
Maybe. I think a lot of it, I think, is very intuitive nowadays, especially with us. We've grown up in a world where we've watched films since we've kids, and we do understand story. We know if something makes sense. We know if something's good or bad or is going in the right direction. I think those things are quite intuitive nowadays. It's just the kind of the technical of it, right? How to technically do stuff. But the actual storytelling and layering, I think we have a good understanding of it.
well, there is a sense in young filmmakers, yes, because I've met a lot uh, uh, in the film school in Tripoli, and I met a lot here in my city, in Benghazi. Most of them believe that it's all about experience. I don't have to read books to make a
Right.
good movie. I
Oh, I
mean, I
see.
disagree. But anyway, we
It's a
don't
bit
have
of
to
both.
label you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of both,
I don't
right?
have to label you. Yes, of course, it's a bit of both, but reading is essential.
Sure.
Watching movies, Hollywood is not the
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, yeah. Sure.
I don't have to label you, but I think you are an editor before, like we have to put editor before filmmaking, right? Like you started as an editor, and you've done amazing work with Donga because I like the movie. This Donga was made in 2023, and perhaps 80% is found footage
Yeah.
by by the uh, young man named, I don't know, I forgot his name, but he was
Muhammad. Muhammad.
Mohammed is the director, but I'm talking about Donga himself.
Dunga, yeah.
Yeah, and I've only, I think, 3 months, 4 months ago, I realized that Mohammed did not edit the movie by himself, that you were a co-editor.
Yes.
And he said, "Well, that makes sense. I mean, it's a huge project. Like you have this massive material of
Yeah.
film uh, shot between 2011 and 2019, even 2020.
Yeah.
How you're going to condense that
Yeah.
in
It's a lot.
45 minutes? Just speaking about editing, how was the process? If it isn't a secret process
No.
that we on before you and Mohammed, like how did you come about creating this Frankenstein monster?
Well, Muhammad, I met in 2014 in Locarno. I was pitching my film at that time, trying to raise money for my Libya film, and he was there with a short film, I think, a short fiction film with the Scottish Institute, something like that. With there was some
Prisoner and
organized.
Jailer?
It might have been Prisoner and Jailer. Yeah, I think so. He was there with some other young Libyan filmmakers, so we met. So we knew each other. So I knew he was making this film, Dunga, and I knew that he at some point he was editing. And he asked me if I could come on board, right, to edit at some point. I find myself nowadays uh, more and more really requiring the filmmaker to present before I start cutting to have something for them to edit something, right? Especially if it's a lot of material. I often ask nowadays, right? Come to me with an assembly, even if it's 4 or 5 hours long, 3 hours long, rather than instead of me starting from baseline,
Right.
right, from scratch, give me something. So what this does is it saves them some money, right? Because they're doing it themselves. It also it allows them to really get to know the material very well, the director, and it it gives me an idea of their vision once they start
Mm.
putting it in a certain order, and then it's a good starting point. So then he had already started editing, and I said, okay, just spend some more time editing, get to a place where you feel like you're enough, you've done enough, and then give it to me, and then let's. So I
Mm.
knew that there were these kind of three movements in the film, which were these three moments of fighting that Dunga kind of goes back into. And there was this strange liminal space of that he finds himself in Turkey, in this hotel, this strange place where he's kind of recovering from the trauma. And Mohanad kind of quite unethically, if you want to say, kind of goes into his hotel room and says, "We're going to watch everything you filmed."
Mm.
Right? And it's like, okay, I haven't seen this stuff since I filmed it, which is
Yeah.
it was quite a genuine reaction. So based on that one kind of genuine feeling about the film, which is that Dunga hadn't seen the material he'd filmed, then they, construct something out of that. So we knew those were the. I think the tough thing was out of all the footage that he shot is choosing the moments that would within themselves have story, right? Within the archival moments, like when they're walking through the battlefield trying to get from A to B, which is a story in itself. There are many of those of these moments in all the material. So the tough thing was cutting it down and choosing that and uh, yeah, like any film. I mean, having an outcome, having some kind of ending that has pathos, that has kind of an emotional resonance, that has meaning, you know.
Mm.
And then I guess it was an idea of cutting down and down because there was so much material. But Muhammad was I was quite surprised and impressed. He was very organized, very diligent. He knew, like, he had lots of notes. He knew where everything was. So it was very good to work with him. I found him to be quite professional in the way. And so it was it was a good process. And we worked remotely, right? Because I was in South Africa, he was in Libya or Tunis. and also the composer was in Khayal, was in Khayal, no,
Khayal,
uh,
yes.
Khayyam. Khayyam is the
Oh,
musician.
the name of okay.
Khayal is his company,
Khayal is,
the
yeah,
production
yeah, I
company.
know.
Khayyam, and then he was in Berlin. We were working together in this way, so we never really sat together in the same space. So yeah,
So you were basically editing the editing.
yeah, exactly. I was a sec. So nowadays, that's what I'm saying. Nowadays, I find myself to become the second editor, but always taking it to a level of so that whenever a film comes to me, it kind of makes sense to me, but it's a mess. It's usually a mess. You cannot present it to the world because it doesn't make sense. So I kind of bring coherence to the edit and kind of some rhythm and layering and rhythm and kind of accessibility so that it's followable. You can follow it, and that's I think many of the recent films I've made. It comes to me, it's a bit of a mess, but let's kind of make it clean and clear and concise and kind of have an energy and a rhythm to it. So yeah, editing the edit, yeah, at the same time as working, directing the edit, directing the director.
You know, for some, just shifting gear, for some film critic, film scholars, when we talk about the intention of the filmmaker, it is almost an anathema when it comes to fiction films. But since the subject is documentaries, do you think the intention of the filmmakers matters? Like, oh, he wants us to believe this or that, or do you think really it's irrelevant to the experience of watching a documentary? Because you know there are some people who would interpret any of your documentaries, either whether the one that you edited or the one that you made. Um, do you have a saying about this? Do you think intention matters?
Well, from the filmmaker, or
Yes.
yeah,
No, no,
sure. I
no.
mean,
From the point of view of the viewer, do you think a filmmaker should be concerned with what the viewer thinks of his
right.
films?
Uh, yes and no, right? I mean, ultimately, if you yourself are concerned about what's happening, and if you treat the material with honesty and with a kind of with respect and a reverence, and not reverence, actually irreverence, but with a respect and an honesty to tell the story. And if it makes sense and it's kind of entertaining and it has a rhythm and it's and it's an expression, I think that's the thing is that if it's an honest expression, then other people will like it. So in that sense, you're honoring the audience. Okay, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the audience thinks, right? But at the same time, the medium is something that is expressed to a public. So, like, why are you doing it? If you don't care what the audience say or think about it, then why are you even in the making films? Do something else. Go and do a PhD that no one reads, right? But if you care what audience thinks, then you'll do then. And if you're making the film with integrity and with honesty and kind of you know as a form of catharsis, then audiences will like it. So it's a double thing, right?
Yeah,
You
there's
keep the audience.
a fine line.
Yeah, what you
There,
while you're making the film, you don't really you keep the audience in mind in terms of like, does this make sense, right? While I'm editing, does this make sense? Is it cool, right? Will people dig it? Fine, but do I like it? Do I like what's happening? Is it working? Okay, fine. Will other people like it? So these thoughts you're always having kind of simultaneously, right? While you're editing, I think while you're putting scenes and sequences together, you're having these thoughts at the same time. But you're not. I don't think anyone thinks. Maybe I think that's with fiction. I think with fiction,
yeah,
people are
exactly.
more
I
like,
mean, just
yeah,
interrupt you because there are lots of Uh, I mean, you are a fellow cinephile. There are lots and lots of film sequences that have been interpreted in different ways. Like, oh, the director with this camera movement, he means this and that. And people say, well, did the director actually mean that? Mean what you're saying? Is
Right.
he aware of what you're saying about his camera movement? And most critics say, well, I don't really care what the director means. The
Yeah.
material tells me this.
Yeah.
And that's why I had to ask in documentaries, because there is a fine line between staying true to your subject and offending your audience. You know, because we're
Yeah. I
now
think.
actually we're actually filming reality.
Yeah.
How can you not, or would you not offend your audience? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean,
I think we don't go out there to offend, but at the same time,
well,
we
we went from the decoration, from the North African decoration, to a giraffe and a
yeah.
reindeer.
I had to plug in my charger.
Okay.
Yeah, I think directors making fiction suffer more with the anxiety of how will the film be received, right?
Hmm.
Uh, does this I have to have this shot because it has this meaning for me? With doc, you're often you find a shot that was not intended at all, but it makes it into the film somehow because in the edit it makes sense. So there's a very different sensibility of the relationship with the audience, I think, with doc and fiction. Uh, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, while I'm editing, if as an editor, I'm like, I don't care. I just want to make a really nice, interesting film that I like. The problem, if whether people like it or not, is not my problem. It's the director's problem, right? I'm going to make a nice edit because the material's good, music's good, characters are working. I'm going to make a nice film that I have fun with. Ultimately, it's on the director's head whether it's
Hmm.
whether I'm making a doc or I think maybe that's why one of the reasons I prefer editing is because you have less responsibility ultimately with the film afterwards. Uh,
Yes, I mean that's the subject of both films that I've seen. I mean, there is I wouldn't say an ideology, but there is politics. There's a political aspect to your films that with your father, Ashur Shams, which the first time I knew of your father was back in 2012 with a show on BBC Arabic, and he was one of the high profile commentator
right.
about the revolution. So there is a political aspect that's, oh, I am with the Libyan revolution. I am not with Gaddafi. And there is another that says, I side with my grandfather because political struggle or resistance is the better answer.
Yeah.
It's not a political diplomatic position that the Muslim community took. And the opposition don't have to agree with you. Like they can watch your films and respect them either way. I don't think the Gaddafi people would respect your film anyway because they don't respect you. um, but
It's
yeah,
fine.
I think that's the thrust of
But
my
I think it's
question.
also I think it's also it's the trick up your sleeve if you're making a personal film is that you can say what you want. It's like it's
Hmm.
your expression. If it's a you and your family, you can do what
You're
you
not a
want.
journalist.
It's say again.
You're not a
Yeah, exactly,
journalist. You're not.
exactly. So you can just kind of it's your expression. You can it's your what can you say about it? So that's what helps you as a if you're making a personal film is that it's your expression. You can get away with whatever you say in a way. I think there weren't many people. I mean, there were problems with both films, I think, but the only like the Egyptians invited me to a show at film festival there in Luxor, but then
Oh,
the government banned the film. The censorship
Oh,
board,
really?
they banned it.
Wow. Wow.
So the Egyptian liked it, but not the government.
That's very sad. It's good and sad to know. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Um, Let me end my clumsy talking points with
No,
two
it's been
questions.
nice talking to you.
No, I'll just end the official line of questioning, and then you may add whatever you want to add. I'm gonna just go back to influences because I
Yeah.
need names. Who are the filmmakers who influenced you the most? Because again, I'm assuming that you're a film buff. And second, what were or was the great films that you've seen, like the latest great films that you've seen this year or last year, just for readers to get inside your head cinematically speaking.
Okay. Wow. I mean, there's so many because, like I said, I grew up in the 80s in London, and we were kind of totally brainwashed by American uh, auteur cinema, independent cinema, and Hollywood, right? I grew up with the kind of films that really influenced me that I loved were John Carpenter films, you know, Assault on Precinct 13 and The Thing and The Fog and all those kind of films. They Live, as well as Scorsese films, Goodfellas was when I was becoming like 15, 14, 15. Goodfellas comes out. So it's like, wow, and when I'm younger than that, it was like The Godfather. And you had those big Apocalypse Now and all those films. Um, and then when I studied film, then I really we looked at auteurs and kind of American independence and all of that. So those filmmakers stayed with me. People like um, the Satyajit Ray in India and Japanese Kurosawa and those kind of filmmakers. And obviously, when I was becoming a teenager, Reservoir Dogs comes out, Pulp Fiction, those kind of films and then there's The Matrix later, and then you kind of like the 90s was this explosion of real, really interesting cinema and music as well. I was kind of really into music as a youngster in London. I collected music and played, DJ'd and stuff like that. There were a lot of musical influences.
Hollywood,
Huh? What kind of music?
what music? Yeah.
Well, the music, I mean, I grew up with me and my brother, we grew up with all, hip hop, jazz, funk, rare groove, soul, and all that. But the music that really took me was jungle and drum and bass. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I collected a lot of that kind of music when I was a youngster and played a lot of it. Some house, but more jungle, drum and bass. That was my first love. So you marry that with this kind of hybrid identity, as well as um, this cinematic kind of idea. So very little documentary until later when I was in South Africa and kind of coming as a filmmaker. I found out about the Black Audio Film Collective, right, which is an collective that grew out of the UK in the 80s. They made documentaries, and there's one film that I watch maybe once a year that really influenced me called Handsworth Songs, right? It's a
I have.
documentary. You can find it on YouTube. Handsworth Songs, Black Audio Film Collective, John Okomfora, and those guys. And that, when I started seeing that stuff, and when I started seeing docs, I felt like I was cheated by my film education, which was kind of really looking at the West and looking at Hollywood and looking at fiction and genre and ideas around feminism and all this, but never showing us the kind of on the ground documentary that was happening while we were there. right, in the 90s and 10 years prior in the 80s. We never had that in the film school. So I felt cheated by my film education, and found out later while I was making docs. So those are the kind of films. Yeah,
I mean, it's fascinating that you bring up Kurosawa and Shutajit Rai. They happen to be two of my favorite filmmakers because the film education of the global film education is Hollywood first, and then comes
yeah,
the rest of the films. So Shutajit Rai, Akira Kurosawa, Yasujiro Ozu, even Osman Sambin, Senegalese
yeah, of
cinema,
course.
South African cinema. We've
Yeah,
come to learn. I mean, I've come to learn about them illegally through torrent files,
right.
and you have the privilege to overpass the torrent files. South American films. I mean, the world is full of wonders,
Yeah,
and you get to know them quite later on. It just to me, I'm wondering whether that late realization of world cinema sort of, I wouldn't say added anything to your filmmaking, but if it added anything to you as a person, like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
as a citizen of the world, as opposed to a European citizen.
Yeah,
Is
definitely.
it
I
fine?
mean,
You said I'm an African filmmaker, but you are a European citizen after all.
yeah, yeah,
You've lived
totally.
most of your life in
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Europe.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's definitely informed my or an understanding of African cinema and kind of films from the global south, and that in an independent way has definitely informed the way I make films or the way I approach the making of films. You might find in the films that I make, you know, still a kind of classical narrative understanding, but the way I approach working with archives is very
Mm.
much it's an anti-institutional mode. I write about it and I kind of actively work against, you know, I work to open archival material for us to use, especially in Africa, for free, or I fight not to pay for archival material. So that kind of the approach to production politics is informed
Mm.
very much by a kind of spirit of, I guess, yeah, a kind of global South spirit. I guess I don't know how to say it without, can't leave one side out. You can't say it's anti-imperial, and you can't say it's anti-capitalist, but it's in a way it also is, you know,
Anti-establishment.
anti-establishment in a way. But at the same time, I make films. The film premiered at Hot Docs, so it's also
Oh yeah.
going to a big
Well,
festival.
it
So
is
it's like,
different.
it's like this strange kind of thing that we have as filmmakers. We begin, documentary begins as the big socialist project, right? It's communal. You're working with people. You're working with communities. But when you finish a film, you want to make money, and you want it to go to the big festival. So there's this kind of dualistic nature
Yeah, they
of
do
filmmaking.
always have the tour film festivals where they invite independent films and independent filmmakers to get together and stay away from those
No, yeah, it's
greedy
good.
distributors.
Yeah, exactly. It's good. So I think what you're saying is that it's informed partly the way I tell story or work with films, but it's informed who I work with, the kind of people I work with, and my approach to the production politics.
You know, it's been. I mean, um, first of all, I'm sorry that I was late for
No, not at all. That's fine.
our meeting because it's ironic because two things why I was late. I was watching a movie and it's sort of I was pausing uh, uh, too much, and it was about Jean-Luc Godard when he shot Breathless.
Okay,
It's called Nouvelle. I hate French.
bad. The well, yeah. Oh, a new film. The new film.
new film by Richard Linklater. It's
Is
the
it good?
latest film by. Oh, it's great. It's fantastic.
I'm sure Goddard
Fabulous.
would be rolling in his grave. Uh,
Oh, I mean, he was known to hate every film about him, but I
yes.
think sadly that he would have loved this.
Okay.
And the second thing is that I had to get food for the cats, and I needed 15 minutes uh, to be late.
No problem.
And, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, it's on point, the film, because the new wave was so. I mean, there were lots of new waves around the globe. You know that in Japan, Brazil,
Uh-huh,
Czechoslovakia,
uh-huh.
Argentina, in Senegal, but none of them came out of film critics. They were all writing about films, and there was at one point they said, you know what? Let's make films to critique films,
Right.
and it's so beautiful how the community allowed them to do so because up to this day, you know that French filmmakers are lucky to have their films distributed away from corporations. I think the French state allows 60% of movie theaters to uh, to screen French films so that
Yes.
they're overwhelmed by Hollywood films.
Yes.
It is on point because that's I always make fun of. Oh, there is a new there's a new wave in Libya. There isn't, of course, but if there is, the even if you gather around 10 to 15 passionate filmmakers, they're doomed. The community, the
Right.
community is not allowing cinema to happen. So that's
Yeah.
why I said when I asked the question earlier, and I told you that I don't want to ask the question because it's a futile question. You can't film on location, even if you secure funds. You can't. You can't film freely, even in a studio. You know, with the as I said earlier, with fundamentalists, with state police, and what's not. And I see no end in sight. That's why
Mm.
I asked.
Yeah, that's why I guess that's why Mohammed made his film outside of Libya.
Yeah,
Um, um, what's her name?
Nazir.
Naziha also, and
Yeah,
her the other film by
Muhammad was
her.
smart enough to live in Tunis.
Yeah, exactly. And myself, I'm outside already,
Yeah.
and so that's maybe at the moment this is the only way we can make films, I guess,
Do you
in
think
Libya.
there
That
will be maybe a new wave in exile? You,
yeah, maybe
Muhammad,
that's it.
see
Why
that?
not? You know,
Yeah, yeah. It's not.
the diaspora is still part of, it's Libya, right? It's just an, how the world is now, right? It's this the
Yes.
expression of Libya is outside, and that maybe is how it must be for now. I mean, but there are ways, Did you ever hear about this story um, of the archives that were taken from Benghazi and kept in by Human Rights Watch in London or in New York?
I made a documentary about it. I did not.
Oh,
I did not mention the incidents itself,
ah,
but the archives was part of the sort of following what's the term, spores,
yes,
the trail that animals leave behind, because no one really knows where the archives are right now.
yeah. So I mean, I'd love to see the film, by the way. But what I'm saying is, there's material about Libya and about the history of Libya that exists somewhere that we haven't seen. Someone, we as as soon as we can get hold of that, there must be stories there that could be made, right? Or we could ex play with it in certain ways. So there are, I mean, you can only make films with film material, right?
Hmm.
Isn't it? You can only make a film if you have material. So there's material somewhere that relates to us that, if we can have access to, or if someone can have access to, then there's the potential for other stories to be made, you know?
You know, do you know what you have in common? The new wave filmmakers in exile. All of you are documentarians.
It's true. True.
I mean, I know that Muhammad is preparing
Yeah,
an
fiction.
adaptation, yeah, of a Ibrahim Coney novel, but that will be the first narrative film since the 80s. I
Okay.
mean, since 2011, there has been a lot of beautiful documentaries. I mean, I think they're doing great with even people here in Libya. But when it comes to fiction, it's very weak, even when it's
Right.
done,
Right.
and it's a mystery to me.
Well, who knows? I mean, the story is not over, you know. So
Yeah,
who knows what happens in the next number of years or who comes out and does what. But inshallah, we make dua. We hope that things, I don't know, things open up for
yeah. You think that best? I think it's good that the new wave starts with documentaries
yeah, yeah,
in
it makes
exile.
sense. It makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting. It's a
Yeah.
marking point of a way of Libyan filmmaking is actually being made outside in docs.
Documentaries in exile, then fiction in exile, and then you
Why
get
not?
documentaries inside of Libya, and then like the fourth and last
Yes,
phase is
fiction inside.
yeah. Is any last words? Anything that you feel that we haven't covered?
I mean, well, I would love to know at some point if this, if I know you guys, you're working on a kind of a community or a network of filmmakers, but I think, we must just keep gathering, right? I think that's the thing, is just keep gathering material, gathering ideas and arguments and hopes and dreams. And then who knows what lands into a film, and makes it to a screen and reaches an audience on the other side of the world. So
I
gather.
do agree. I think I remember telling Samer, the founder, co-founder of LFI. It's been going on, I think, since 2000. I'm not sure when they began, but it was before COVID, maybe 2017. And they were actually showing films. The only thing they did, the screening films, they did a directory of filmmakers. And it's only now that they actually started with the articles. And I
Right.
think that's a good, I mean, articles can at least show the people, uh, show the readers who are the Libyan filmmakers, who makes
Yeah.
films these days. And when it comes to gathering, I think they're struggling with the cinema authority, but they're doing great job. I think they're doing great work with gathering material and writing articles, and it could be one of you know like one engine of the many engines of the Libyan new wave.
Yeah, exactly. We hope for the
Yeah,
best.
yeah. Well, I really hope this won't be our last
No,
conversation,
not at
and
all.
yeah,
Yeah, lovely to speak with you and to meet you finally.
thank you,
Send me your
thank you.
films. I want to see them.
I will, I will, and have a. I don't know I know good evening in Portuguese, but I don't know good night.
Boa noite. Also, boa noite.
Oh, it's the same. Oh, okay, they're lazy.
Yeah, they're lazy. They're very chill. Very chill. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
good night, man.
Nice to see you. Nice to speak to you. Take care. Ma salama.
Bye.
Okay.